Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's my Toyota RAV4 Hybrid. And as of filming this right now, I've owned it for 9 months. I've put over 15,000 miles on it, and I've had quite a few interesting experiences after owning this for that long. This is the first unibody Toyota I've ever owned, because I have had some body-on-frame Toyotas in the past. It's also the first hybrid I've ever owned, and recently, in the last 3 or 4 months especially, I've driven a lot of other hybrids. All the Subaru Forester hybrid trim levels, and the CR-V hybrid trim levels, and a lot of other interesting stuff. So today I'm going to share the pros, the cons, how this vehicle compares to all of those, and a lot of other ownership experiences that I've had along the way that you might be interested in. If you are considering buying one of this generation Toyota RAV4, this is the 2019 to 2025 model year. But if we're being honest, the new generation coming out for 2026 is going to be very similar to this platform. So if you guys get anything out of this video today, or you appreciate the ownership insight, please consider liking this video. Comment your thoughts and opinions below, subscribe if you haven't already. And with that said, let's get right into it. I want to start out by going over a few of the pros and give you guys a little bit of context and background for why I purchased this in the first place. It replaced a Subaru Outback Wilderness. I actually owned that vehicle for 3 years. That was the longest I've ever kept anything because that was such a good vehicle. And the whole time I owned it, it didn't give me any problems. And I had a few Subarus before the Outback Wilderness as well. But the reason that I switched from my body-on-frame Toyotas to the Subarus is for my lifestyle, for all the driving I do. It just fit the bill a little bit different. Not only were they more economical, a little bit less expensive, they got better MPG, had a little bit more power, but they were just really good, really safe family vehicles, and I really appreciated that. But the RAV4 is a top competitor to the Subarus, especially the Forester and the Outback. And for many years in the last decade, the RAV4 has been the best-selling global vehicle. They sell like 1 million units every single year. So I was pretty interested to try out the best-selling vehicle globally and see what all the hype was about, but also to try out a hybrid. There was the rumor that the new generation of RAV4 would become all hybrid, and that did come true, just like the Camrys did for their new generation. And honestly, after driving this for 9 months, 15,000 miles, I have zero regrets. It's been a really good vehicle. It's extremely economical. During the winter, where I do a lot of interstate driving at 80 miles an hour to get to my day job, this gets as little as 30 miles per gallon compared to some of the Subarus I used to own that could get into the low 20s on some of those commutes. I'll take 30 miles per gallon all day long, but during the warmer weather, when the engine runs a little bit more efficiently, this going 80 miles an hour can average 35 to 37 miles per gallon on a lot of my drives. What's even more impressive is when the gas light comes on, the low fuel light, you usually have around 3.4 more gallons of fuel, at least theoretically, in compared to how big the tank is compared to how many gallons you can put in. So I've actually driven this over 60 miles past being on 0 miles remaining. And when I filled it up, I still had basically 1.9 miles more in reserve for fuel. So that's pretty impressive how far the range can be. Before you even hit the gas light, you might go 400 miles. If you go completely until you're empty, you might go well over 500. I don't recommend you find that out, but I was curious one day to find out for myself how far I could go. And about 60 miles is about as far as I wanted to push it. But beyond that, this thing is actually fairly quick. I'll show you what it does 0 to 60 right here. 0 to 60 in my RAV4. Keep in mind density altitude is about 6,500 feet. So the gas portion of this powertrain is down on power, at least 20% compared to a colder day at sea level. I have it in eco mode. We're gonna do a little bit of a brake rev, see what it can do. And then about 5 minutes later, I'll be back on the same portion of my private road to do it in sport mode. Traction is off, brake rev happening right now. Whoa, a little bit of wheel spin. Not too shabby. True 0 to 60 in eco mode came in at 8.09 seconds. And 0 to 60 now in sport mode, same road, same time of day. Everything else is the same. Let's see what it can do. A little bit of a brake rev. Not as much wheel spin. And true 0 to 60 came in at 8.07. So ultimately, I'm not sure if it matters whether you're in sport mode or eco mode. I guess it just depends on what color gauges you like to have. And that's during like a 90-degree day during August, during the summer. And that's, you know, at my elevation, 6,500 feet of density altitude, that is pretty impressive. Even that is faster than the CR-V Hybrid and certainly the Forester Hybrid on better density altitude days. This vehicle is also pretty rugged. Even though it has painted fender flares, which I personally like because most of the time I'm not going off-road, they still have held up pretty well. This silver paint, it's also held up really well. I have some potentially permanent bugs on the front of the car, but overall the paint job has held up well, and even running it through the car wash right before filming this, most of the bugs have come off. That paint still looks really good. But I do have to say that one of the pros, which can also be one of the cons on the RAV4, is that the interior holds up really well because it is kind of the cheaper plastics. Some of you guys probably saw I did a base model RAV4 video, just a quick review, and the interior is basically the exact same, minus the heated seats, the heated leather wrap steering wheel, the sunroof up there. It was basically everything that you get in here. And while these aren't necessarily the most comfortable materials, they do age really well. It does look basically exactly the same as the day I took this vehicle home. I do have to say though, I really wish Toyota splurged and gave us just a little bit more bolstering on the hard plastic, because my knee does rub into that. The bolstering of the seat doesn't really angle my knee away from it. So that is a pretty uncomfortable place, but overall the interior of this vehicle is expected to hold up well. Even the back seats, even having a lot of dog kennels, child safety seats, stuff like that back here in the past, it still has held up really well. It doesn't look like it's been used a whole lot. Although one of the cons we'll get into right now is the back doors on the RAV4 do not open up as far as the rest of the competition. That can be a struggle sometimes. This is as far as it opens. And honestly, in person, that's not that far. It really should open about 10 more degrees so that you're not constantly clunking into it. But because the materials are tough and durable, I guess that's the trade-off. You can see that it's definitely been scraped a few times, but it's actually held up its texture pretty well. But potentially the biggest reason I bought this vehicle going into it was for the A25A engine, an Atkinson cycle, very efficient dual port injection D4S engine. So it has direct and port injection to help keep the engine very clean and long lasting. It doesn't clog up with carbon from all the materials that go through it. And then having the hybrid system, I know a lot of people still think that a CVT is bad, but this is an eCVT. There's not as many moving parts, it's more planetary and stationary, and it's just a little bit simpler than a traditional CVT or a traditional automatic. So this CVT seems to be about the most reliable transmission in the world right now as far as a new vehicle is concerned from everything I've seen on the forums. There was even one guy on one of the forums who had like 450,000 miles on his early year of this generation RAV4 eCVT that he traded in, but he never even did a transmission service or a fluid change on it. Not saying I'm recommending that, but that is amazing how well put together these engines are. And where most of my driving is getting to my therapy job, doing a lot of interstate, a lot of highway, I don't want to be stranded, I don't want to be left without, and having this power plant is awesome. I've actually had 2 transmissions go out on that therapy drive before in my LS1 Trans Am and the 2023 Miata Club that I owned for a while. So this was kind of a refreshing sight to get such a reliable powertrain, and to know that for as long as I keep this vehicle, I don't have to worry about that. But in the back, there's also a temporary spare tire. And a lot of the other hybrids, like the CR-V hybrid, like the Forester hybrid, they don't actually have a spare tire anymore. But this does, and that's pretty neat. And then the last pro that we need to get into is for being a compact crossover, for being a unibody Toyota. This actually has 900 pounds of payload capacity, which is more than I think just about every single Toyota 4Runner, even the new 6th generation that just came out. So this can be a workhorse just as much as those vehicles, as long as you're staying on relatively flat ground, as long as you're not really abusing it off-road. But this thing, I've hauled hundreds of pounds of pavers in it multiple times, and it's done just fine. It really didn't even squat that much. The suspension absorbed it really well, and it actually felt pretty good and pretty stable driving it with the extra weight over the rear anyways. But if you're wondering how I hurt my arm, pretty sure it's just a sprain and not a hairline fracture, so we're wrapping it up, protecting it today. But that was just from extending my patio. I'm actually gonna have a really cool video on that, the before, the middle, and the after pretty soon, recommending and promoting superior patio covers in the southern Idaho, northern Utah area, and some of the surrounding states, because they did phenomenal work. My patio has never been the same before, and I can't believe it. And a small temporary injury, although I don't like injuries, it was probably worth it. But honestly, without having the RAV4 to haul all my bricks, haul all my sand, and all the other supplies, you know, it wouldn't look like what it is today. But anyways, more on that if you want to watch that patio video. It's going to be coming out pretty soon. But overall, this vehicle can actually do quite a bit of work, and I really appreciate that about the RAV4, especially because it is kind of durable. and because it's not a crazy expensive luxurious vehicle like a Lexus equivalent or something, at least for myself, I don't really care if I scuff it up a little bit. That's just expected to happen, and once the first couple scratches have happened, you can start to breathe a little bit deeper and relaxing a little bit more that your baby is now finally getting worn in. And now we get to talk about the cons of this platform. And honestly, don't let anyone fool you. Even though this is the best-selling vehicle globally, it's not perfect. It has its fair share of problems. Every single automaker, every single model has pros and cons, and this, in my opinion, has quite a few cons. First of all, the interior, like I mentioned earlier. The plastics feel like you're in a child playground. Sure, they're gonna age well. They're not gonna get beat up by the abuse that goes on in the vehicle. If there is any, I hope there's not. If there is, you should probably report it. But the materials are just not nice. Mine was about $38,000 sticker, and honestly, this is worse in class, basically, for the interior. I'm sure the new generation is gonna be a little bit nicer, but it's also gonna be a little bit more expensive, and compared to the last couple of years of compact crossovers, the interior of this vehicle is just subpar. The back seats are also not huge. Part of that is because this does have basically class-leading cargo capacity. It's about 37 cubic feet back there. Overall, it's 70, so that is a little bit less than a Subaru Forester, depending on the trim level. But our Forester, our 2025 Forester, has much more spacious back seats. I'm not gonna quote the numbers to you, the headroom, the hip room, all that stuff, but we don't drive this vehicle as often when the back seats need to be loaded, because it's just not quite as comfortable. And then the windows, like a lot of Toyota SUVs and trucks, the visibility just is not quite as good as some of the competition. These are better than Mazda's, but they're not nearly as good as Subarus. You'll notice, like a lot of Toyotas, that the curvature of the window, it's wider at the bottom than is at the top. So your head is gonna be further back, and then trying to look down, you can't see as close to the side of the vehicle. And then because basically every Toyota these days wants to have a hood that's nearly parallel to the ground, then they want a very aggressive bold, a cut, a 90-degree angle. The visibility isn't as good either because you can't see very well over that hood, and it's gonna take a lot more distance to see further out. So I'm not saying the visibility is bad. It could be worse. It could be, you know, a Mazda or some of the other vehicles. But compared to our Subaru, this is rarely the vehicle that we choose if it wasn't just for the hybrid components, if there were just two of us in the front seats driving it. And then beyond that, the regeneration braking in this vehicle is subpar, especially compared to Honda's new system. Some of the Honda hybrids at the 2-liter, for being a smaller displacement engine, it actually has 4 settings of aggressiveness for how well it does engine braking, regen braking for you, so that you don't just rely mostly on your front brakes wearing those out. And this doesn't have paddle shifters like the Honda does to control that. You can go down into sport, go over and go through the 6 simulated gears, and that does help a little bit. The only way I've ever gotten a full battery on this is by going downhill in a low gear and just letting the engine brake for me, and in that case it has done pretty well. But in general, the regen braking on this 2.5-liter is not as good as Honda's 2-liter, and it's probably similar to Subaru's, but Subaru's hybrid system, which kind of got some components from Toyota, is not necessarily a class-leading unit other than the fact that it has the best all-wheel drive of any of the hybrids. So that is unfortunate, but to redeem itself a little bit, you can see it's in EV mode right now. This has a bigger battery pack than a lot of the other hybrids. It has a 1.6 kilowatt hour. So you can drive a little bit faster and a little bit longer in EV mode. You can also idle and car camp in here, and huge thanks to Lost Horizon for the mattress you guys sent me a couple months ago. That thing fits perfectly back there, and it's actually really comfortable to use, so I'll link you guys in the description below, and if you guys are interested in their mattress, check them out. I also have a video of it. It's pretty cool that you can car camp so well on this platform. But the 1.6 kilowatt battery pack, a redeeming factor of it is I've actually driven around 50 to 55 miles per hour in EV mode, actually accelerating slowly. Now it hasn't been able to go from 0 to 55 continuously. It's only been able to make it to about 35 like that. But once it's charged up, you can kind of bounce between gas and hybrid electric powertrains at 50, 55 on flat ground, and that's actually super impressive. And we are going to check the tire tread because I've had these Geolander all-terrain Yokohama Geo15 tires on for I think about 13,000 miles. They've only been rotated once, so they are due for another rotation. But even at about 13,000 miles, they still have at least 9, almost 10 30 seconds of tread. So they've only gone 1 to 2 30 seconds less in that amount of time. These tires probably could pretty easily last at least the 65,000 mile rating that they have. And they really have redeemed this vehicle in the winter on snow and ice. We didn't have a ton of snow and ice last winter, but compared to how this did on the factory tires before that, it really did make an improvement. I'm seriously so thankful that I have these tires, and as far as I can tell, it really didn't knock the MPG more than about 1, potentially 2. But honestly, a lot of your driving characteristics and habits are going to play a much bigger role than just what the tires are on a platform like this, especially where the electric all-wheel drive system, it's disconnected in the rear, it's only kicked in when it needs to be. And while low snow situations, this might be a totally adequate all-wheel drive system. I do have to say, doing accelerations while turning or while braking and the wheels are turned and you're putting a ton of load on the front wheels when they're doing more than just the turning and the braking, but they're also the power wheels in this case, it's not as stable as the Subarus I've owned before. It's not as stable as a lot of other competent all-wheel drive systems. And kind of a scary situation I had just a few weeks ago is I was passing some semis on the interstate going the speed limit of 80 miles an hour, and a car in the slower lane tried to pass me as I was passing the semis who were going really slow. So they cut in front of me. I'm not necessarily sure what the safety features did, but having to brake really hard and can kind of turn and get on the shoulder of the road a little bit, this thing felt very unsettled, very wobbly, and it was not a pleasant experience at all. And I don't think that our Subarus in the past would have handled quite that poorly. So it was a little bit eye-opening. But additionally, the safety features on this, compared to all the other vehicles I've driven, the new generations of Hondas, our Subarus, the safety features, Toyota Sense 2.5 really is not very good. I can't wait to see what 4.0 is in the new generation of RAV4. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, when you're in adaptive cruise using lane keep assist, even when the settings in the infotainment screen are turned up to the most intense, they still don't work very well. The intensity differences between the 3 settings for a lot of those features doesn't seem to actually alter it very much, and they just don't work very competently. You wander more, it kicks you out of lane keep assist faster and adaptive cruise a little bit faster than a lot of the other new vehicles I've tested. And overall, it's just not as confidence inspiring. You should never take your hands off the wheel, but this is a vehicle especially where I really recommend you don't take your hands off the wheel because you don't quite know what it's gonna do, especially when you are at speed and you're basically just a big front wheel drive SUV, and it's really not gonna handle that well. So hold on tight, but if you're not used to a vehicle like this or your previous car didn't have adaptive cruise or lane keep, even a mediocre system like this, it's probably gonna be really cool. It probably is gonna feel like a huge improvement. It's just once you've driven better systems, this one is kind of sad, to be honest. So ultimately, I know this review probably sounded kind of bipolar because there are a lot of things that the RAV4 does extremely well. Some things that a lot of the other rivals just can't match. But then there's other areas where Toyota just didn't seem to even care. They really skimped out on interior materials, how wide the door hinges open, stuff like that. I could understand the doors not opening wide if this was the safest compact crossover in the class, but it's not even the safest rating. I think the Subaru Forester is probably the safest one, maybe even the Mazda CX-5. It's not the RAV4 though, they're all pretty close. But still, like, I just don't understand some of the shortcomings of this platform and how it has become so popular. But honestly, I'm really hopeful that the new generation fixes this. I've mentioned this in 1 or 2 other videos and a couple comments with you guys down below. I probably will still buy the new generation as soon as I have the opportunity, if everything works out and it makes sense. I'd love to experience it. I'd love to see how Toyota 4.0 Safety Sense redeems 2.5. I'd love to see what the differences are on the new 17 extra horsepower that this one doesn't have. I want to see if it's actually faster on GPS or if it's just compensating for the extra weight that this vehicle has. So anyways, guys, I have no regrets. I don't mean to be beating up this vehicle too much, but just objectively, you know, it does have issues. It's not perfect. Every car has issues though. Every single car in the world has issues. There is no perfect vehicle. There's just the best one for you. And in my regular honest reviews, that's why I always recommend you guys test drive a lot of vehicles. Don't just take anyone's word for it on YouTube or any other magazine or, you know, automotive journalist or anything. Just check them out for yourself. See what feels the most natural. See what you can live with, what makes you the happiest. Some people care more about the looks of the car on the exterior. Some care more about the interior comfort. Some care more about just knowing that the powertrain is extremely reliable, which is the main reason I bought this. I could care less about those other things, but I know a lot of you guys have commented on my videos in the past, the issues that you have with this car and other cars. So that's why I have to be brutally honest and just share what the issues are, because sometimes you don't realize it when you have the love goggles on until you actually buy it, you take it home, and then you find out what you're actually living with. And living in your garage, like anyways, What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Please comment below and subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video and check out the patio video. It was worth the injury. That's how awesome having an actual decent patio is. Anyways, see you guys. Take care.